Hello folks. Well, this time what I want to do is introduce the project, give you a bit of a rundown on what it's all about, where to find all the information. Hopefully we can get a reasonable overview of things here. So in the slides I'm just going to go over the basics, give you the rundown on kind of what the project's like. The gory details will be on some web pages that we'll point out in a few minutes. All right, let's see, where did I want to go? So this is a semester-long project. There's going to be 6 labs. Each lab is going to contribute to part of the project. The overall project is worth 40% of your grade. I believe that'll be 10% for the final submission, and then 6% each for your best 5 labs. So we'll drop the lowest lab mark. We're going to use our usual Git processes to get you to pull a repository, fork it, clone it, do your work on it locally, and eventually push it back to a place where we can mark it. And again, we'll talk about the processes for that later. In the first lab, you'll get the original version of the Git repository of code. Every lab, so every 2 weeks basically, we'll push a new repository. You'll pull that, merge it with all of the work that you've done so far. So every couple of weeks there's going to be changes to the requirements for the project and changes to the code that I'm supplying that you're going to have to merge in with your own code. So new requirements every couple of weeks. For the final project, what I'm expecting is that you will have cleaned up any issues that I point out in your labs. So again, you'll have stuff that's due every couple of weeks, and then I'll give you feedback on that, and you're expected to have cleaned up any problems for the final version of the project, as well as meeting, whatever the requirements are for the final lab. So that's the basic idea. I just want to make sure that you can find everything for the project. So if you go to the usual handy-dandy course webpage, and there's a link up there for labs and project. Again, it's going to go through pretty much what I just said. Some notes there on the late penalties if you're submitting things late. And let's see, a couple of notes. I won't be giving you sample solutions for the labs. I'll do my best to point out what you need to clean up and give you an idea of how, but you are expected to come up with your own code for this. One of the big things is that this stuff won't compile and run anywhere but on our servers, just because of the nature of the way this is set up. So you will have to do your work on the servers. So in this collection of links, there'll be links for each of the different labs. There'll be slides and a video for each of the different labs. I'll release the slides and the video at the same time as I release the new repository every 2 weeks. I would advise you to go through the background information. Again, these were from the lecture slides and links and whatnot earlier, but there's a quick guide to your lab accounts. If you haven't worked here before, a quick guide to going through and actually pulling a Git repository and working on it and then submitting it later. So again, if you need a refresher or if this is your first time at VIU, here's a quick guide, and you will need to do this kind of thing in the first lab. And again, some quick background on SSH and some basic programming. We're going to be doing a lot more with Bash and Linux as the semester goes on, but this will get you started if you need it. I will stick in some links for a quick intro to Vim. I do recommend using either Vim or Emacs as your editor, so learning those, it's going to make life a lot easier later on. However, back to the ideas for the day. So, again, this stuff's going to be due every couple of weeks. The full details are on the course project page, which once again is linked off of the main page for the course. So there's a preliminary project overview and then the actual details for the lab. So if you dive into the preliminary project overview, we'll talk about that a bit in just a second. There's links there for each of the labs. And what you're going to be doing in the labs is essentially trying to apply all of the stuff that we talk about in the lectures. So in your labs for your work on the project, you're going to be doing things with Git, with Bash scripting, with developing man pages, working with C++ and the G++ compiler, writing makefiles, using debuggers and profilers, working with GTK to create a little GUI interface, working with Unicode, and a bunch of other bits and pieces. So the labs are going to cover a fairly wide range of activities, all applied to the project code. Again, this project code is only actually going to run and only actually going to compile on our servers. So you're going to be SSHing to our servers and doing your work there. So what this thing is all about is the actual code for this. Really, this is just a vehicle for us to use all of the different things that we want to try out this term, all of the different tools and techniques. But the data structure we're going to be working with this time around is called quadtrees. So it's kind of like the idea of a binary tree. It's just that every node has 4 children instead of 2. If you do some Googling, you'll see that quadtrees are used for image compression, a huge variety of other different bits and pieces for subdividing space and trying to arrange where to store things in an effective manner. But essentially the idea is we take a 2-dimensional map divided into 4 quadrants, and then each of the quadrants is represented as one node of our tree. And then each of those quadrants we divide into 4 smaller quadrants, again, each represented by a node. Each of those we divide into 4 more. There's a couple of images by Mike James that might be helpful here. So this would be kind of the idea, is we've got the root of the tree just represents the whole space that you're playing with. And then you go one level down and it's divided into 4 subtrees, right? Each representing a quarter of the total space. You go down one more level and it's divided into 16, right? Each of those 4 spaces is divided up into 4 other smaller spaces. So you get this kind of an idea for the quad tree structure. So when you're trying to represent things in this 2-dimensional space, you specify which portion of the tree, which node of the tree you want to represent this in. You know, should it belong in part of the whole tree, or just in this one quadrant, or just in this one, sub-quadrant? So this is the idea for the quad trees. So our project is just playing with a data structure that represents these things. So back to wherever we were here. Now, our implementation of quad trees is going to be kind of unique and a little bit specialized, so don't expect to be able to just kind of plug and play quad tree code you find out on the web, but you can look around for ideas. So in our project, you're going to find that you're given in the first lab a whole bunch of object code and a whole bunch of header files and a little demo program that works with classes playing with these things. So there's going to be an address class that stores an address of a space within our quad trees. There's going to be an item class that represents the items we're going to be storing in these things. And there's going to be an item tree class that represents this quad tree to store the items in. And then the demo program is going to use all 3 of these things. And we'll have a header file for each. Eventually you'll have a .cpp file for each, an object file for each, and the actual executable. So you'll get the first version of all this stuff in Lab 1, and we can start taking a look at the actual code then. So again, this is a chunk of code that we'll use to start playing with the different aspects of the course that we want to take a look at. So we will turn you loose. Again, do go through the description in the project page. It talks in more detail about what we'll be doing. It gives you an overview, gives you a bit of a discussion about quad trees and how we're going to use string addresses to describe locations within a quad tree. And we'll talk about the classes themselves. And again, just a reiteration of the fact that with every lab, we'll introduce new project requirements and new batches of code for you to mix in with whatever you've got so far. All right, that might be the place where we'll leave it for a moment here. I'm going to produce another video in a few minutes to talk about the code standards that you're expected to follow. And then again, we'll release a new set of slides and video for each of the different labs as the term goes on. All right, we'll leave it there for now.